Good morning, everybody. It's Lynn from a bit of Birdsong, and I have a journal I'm going to try to share kind of quickly. It is a fairy journal. It's one that I've really become friends with. If there was ever a journal that I am going to have a hard time parting with, this is one of them. I've been working on this journal for a few days, and this journal had a lot of elements, or has a lot of elements, that are products of just trying new things and working on things that I've been needing to try and needing to figure out. This journal all started with the image on the outside, and I will show you that. This is an illustration from a very old version of Peter Pan, and the illustration is by Arthur Rackham. He is one of my favorite Alice in Wonderland illustrators. This illustration is called Fairy Tiffs, or the fairies and their tiffs with the birds, different things like that. But I just fell in love with it, and I thought this has to be the start of the fairy journal that I have been wanting to make. This image on the outside is printed on fabric. That is something that I have been wanting to try, and I really enjoyed the process. I love the effect. I love the way it turned out. Of course, you can see the little charm on the front. Encourage your hopes, not your fears. The closure is some beautiful burgundy ribbon, and I have incorporated a lot of vintage lace, light white and cream colored things, a lot of sheer fabrics, touches of gold. I wanted this to feel sort of ethereal and fairy tale like. I wanted it to also feel sort of childish and light. A little bit grungy. I wanted it to look used. We know the fairies live in gardens and woods, so I didn't want it to appear perfectly new and sparkling clean. On the inside, there's another image that's printed on fabric. I, again, love the way it turned out. I just dripped some of the mixture where I had been tea staining around the edges of the print once it was done. And you can see how it spread. I didn't want it to get into their faces, which fortunately it did not. This one crept pretty close, but it ended up perfect. I love the way it turned out. I took a piece of vintage trim and stamped the word wanted. In the front there is a journal card that's part of a set that is going into the shop today. Again, that was another thing I had been wanting to complete, is a little kit for fairy pages. And here is a page from a vintage copy of The Borrowers. I'm currently working on that book, doing a project as well, and this page was perfect. I don't want to bend it. There's a lot of pretty trim in this. I love the way the red stripe in that looks really old. It reminds me of like maybe an old saloon, that type of feel. The reason I put wanted on the front page, that one word represents the goings on and the intentions of humans who want to find out who it is in touch with the fairies around them. And of course, these sisters are definitely in touch with the fairies. They look a little bit mischievous, but very sweet and very curious. This page is wallpaper with some beautiful old fabric pieces. This again is printed on fabric. I tried several different images and I love the way they turned out. The butterfly is just stamped with acrylic ink. Here is an old poem. It's called Flame Fairies. Knights on golden prancing steeds, elves and goblins leaping higher. I can see the finest things in the dancing fire. Sometimes dragons twist and curl tails of red and purple light. Sometimes giants, sometimes gnomes, meet in fearsome fight. Banners stream above the wood, Gaily painted ships sail past with a green or yellow flag flying from the mast. Then they change from this to that, steeds to castles, ships to kings, and a dragon vanishes into golden rings. Flames are fairies prisoned fast, long within the logs they lie. Once they're free, they gaily leap upward to the sky. I love that. That had to be included. It's perfect for this journal. As you can see, this journal it's kind of fat. It's a one signature. I would not call this an easy writing journal. It does have space for writing and gluing, but since it is so fat and since it is one signature, I think of it more as a collector's journal. That's not to say you can't write and glue and staple and put your own things into it. You absolutely can, but I just wanted to kind of make that point at the beginning. This is printed on fabric. It's some old flowers that I lifted from a vintage image. I did a lot of digital work with this one as well, and I guess that's one reason I feel so married to this journal. I just did a lot of things that I've been wanting to do, and this journal's been in my hands for a few days. This is an old fairy image that's printed on a dictionary page. Here's one of the pages in the fairy digital kit. A rustle in the wind reminds us a fairy is near. The flowers were taken from the cover of a music sheet from the early 1900s. This is a piece of paper from the inside cover of a book. I love working with paper like that. It's especially in old books. It's typically very sturdy, very matte, very pretty. And I just stamped very faintly a rose design with gold acrylic paint. Here we have a pocket, and there's one of the journal cards in the set. Some of my hand-dyed paper. There is a lot of really pretty old trim in this journal. Here's a page that is also in the digital kit. This little child was printed on fabric, and there's just a piece of old lace underneath. I wanted this journal again to capture the spirit of youth, fairy tales, and sometimes even the connection between children and spirits or fairies. On my blog, amothersjournal.com, that I've kept for 10 years, I recently put an entry relating to what felt like a spirit in the house that I raised my children in. And my oldest son, especially from the time that he was very young, would talk about seeing a child in the house. The house was really old. It's about 100 years old. I won't tell the whole story here, but I'll put a link to that blog post in case anyone is interested in that ghost story. I love the way this turned out. I had a slide mount that was cardboard. They don't always come apart really easily, but this one fell apart on its own. The inside was really yellowed, so I used it to make a frame for this vintage image, which is also printed on fabric. I love this fabric, this sheer pink. It made a beautiful pocket. These are your tickets to Fairyland, and there's an angel stamped in acrylic paint. This is a beautiful old book page. It's a scan of the page. I found just a few loose pages in one of my searches for ephemera. This is from an old version of Cinderella, and it's printed on my hand-dyed paper. There's an old ad that's printed on fabric and some beautiful stamping. More dyed paper. That stamp is done in acrylic paint and ink. This is a really fun old letter from 1941. The entire letter is in here. The letter is about 7 or 8 pages, and because of the way it's put into the book, the pages are going to skip around. You can skip around and read the entire letter. I've read most of it, and it's a really fun letter. This paper is, of course, an old map page, and it has been tea stained. There's a beautiful image, an old corset ad that's been printed on my hand-dyed paper. This is a page printed from the digital kit from the ledger that I have from the 1800s. There's some old music, more tea-stained paper. Here's some beautiful scrapbook paper that is tea-stained. And there's a library card that says Nature Study. Love the way that paper turned out. There's a lot of really pretty old trim in here, as I've already mentioned. This page is from a vintage literature book. The section is on the Victorian era, and it is centered around the English poets, and that's my love. That is what I studied in college. And here are the Brownings. One of the things that I tried with this journal that I have been wanting to try, I have an order currently for a custom journal, and the lady who ordered it wants a large journal, full-size pages. She wants a lot of decorating, but she also wants pages that are blank, art paper heavy enough for her to paint and draw and write on. So I had been turning over in my mind how I was going to construct this journal that I need to make and that I'm going to make soon. And then Nick the Booksmith shared a tutorial on sewing pages in using fabric between the two pages that of course are placed completely full and upright. They're not turned and folded. And I had been really thinking, how am I going to accomplish getting this journal made? Her tutorial was perfect timing. I had been thinking of similar things and turning ideas over in my mind, but I had not really, nothing had solidified, and I had not set on an idea that I thought would work, and her idea was perfect. So I appreciate that share, definitely, and I love the way it turned out. It's adds a little more time to making the journal, but it's totally worth it, and once you get started, it's really not that time-consuming of a process. There's a page from the book with vintage playing cards. I'm going to miss this book when it's gone, and it's just about gone. I've used a lot of those pages. That's from the old ledger. Here is a beautiful calendar page, very wooded setting. There is a piece of scrapbook paper that's been backed with some beautiful fabric. This image is printed on fabric, and there we have the stamp of the little angel again. More music. Here's another digital page. Life itself is the most wonderful fairy tale. Hans Christian Andersen. Just a little stamp there. That's from a really old book of French interior design elements. There's a piece of wallpaper, more hand-dyed paper, and I love the way this page turned out. There is a piece of poetry from an old book I have by Helen Steiner Rice. That butterfly is stamped with pink acrylic paint, and here is another one of the pages from the letter. Page 5, page 7. Here's another page from the digital kit. This fairy was digitally taken from a painting called Spirit of the Night. I love the way the purple ink ended up on that page. And here's the center. Again, I wanted this journal to feel very childlike and very much like a fairy tale. This rose is printed on fabric, and I just stamped the word imagine. It's backed with fabric. There's another page in the digital kit. This painting, this was digitally taken from a painting by Sophie Anderson, and the name of that painting is Your Fairies Made of Most Beautiful Things. More of the letter. More wallpaper. And there is a pocket taken from some fabric, and an image is sewn on that's printed on fabric, and there is another journal card. There's some burlap and fabric piece with the butterfly stamped on it, and I just used some water and a little bit of distress ink to darken that, and I splattered some distress ink on the page as well. I love this page from the digital kit. It is just so sweet. It says, "The fairies instantly wanted the baby's hat." This old photograph, I kind of highlighted the baby and turned the pom-pom on her hat a pink color, and I think the fairies will have the hat before it's over with, or at the very least befriend the baby. Here's the other part of that calendar page. Here's some of my old leaves that they were old when I found them, and I've had them for probably 10 plus years. It's another element of my stash that I'm going to be sorry to see disappear. This is what I have left, and I used to have a much larger bag. These were taken from yards and yards and yards of vintage garland. Took a lot of work to take all of this off. Things aren't made like they used to be, and they were very nicely adhered to beautiful old wire. So I got a lot of use making different things out of that project, and it's still carrying on, not over yet. More of the ledger. There's the cards again. There's some lace and trim that has been tea stained. Little stamp. More of the poetry. There's another journal card. More music. Love that image. That's printed on the hand-dyed paper. An old map page. This letter, the lady who wrote it even went to the trouble, or she took the time to do an outline of their house that they're working on, and I couldn't help but think about fairies or the borrowers who might be getting their hands on this and deciding what they're going to do. More tea-stained paper. Here's a beautiful old illustration from Rumpelstiltskin. Of course, woodland creatures and fairies sometimes are very mischievous. They're not always up to bright and sunny deeds. And here's a little pocket taken from a table scarf that was embroidered. I love this little picture. He has been befriended by the fairies who live in the gardens around his house, and he is well cared for and watched after by the fairies. They have befriended this little child. That beautiful stamp that shows up in my work sometimes. The other side of that digital page, there's an old typewriter. Beautiful trim. I have 4 kits in the making with a lot of this material. There's the other side of that book page with the pocket. There's some gold stamping. Another part of the digital kit. I love C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia. There's another beautiful image that was stamped on a dictionary page. Here's some pretty wallpaper. The beautiful ladies on this they were pretty faint, but I touched their dresses up with a tiny bit of gold paint. And that napkin has just been decoupaged on. Here we are at the back. I love this photograph. I don't know whose it is or whose it was. I found it in some ephemera. It honestly looks like a garden that I've toured in Hillsboro, North Carolina, but I can't swear to it. Not that I would swear to anything, but it's just beautiful. I can't tell if it's early morning light or late in the day, like almost evening. But that's definitely a place where you would find garden fairies. And even though we didn't catch him, I think some fairies have probably jumped from lily pad to lily pad on this beautiful card. Here is one of my favorite charms. I don't know if I have any of these left. At one time I had quite a few. They're really nice. They have some weight to them. These beautiful molded bees from metal, and that is just sewn in on this piece of ribbon. Very pretty. The last thing, and even though this journal is one signature, you can see how full it is. There are places to write. This is the kind of journal that you would need to just take your time with and be patient with for writing. It's very full. It's meant to be that way. I included a dashboard if you should want to use one for some of the pages. And the dashboard came from my efforts at sewing pages onto fabric. And these are some pages from the borrowers. This is like a little journal in and of itself. So just a few pages. They're all sewn in on old cotton fabric. Ties right in with the book. You could do something with this as a separate project, or again use it for the dashboard. So that is the fairy journal. It is going into the shop right now, and as I just mentioned, I have 4 journal kits that will be listed later today. I'm almost done putting those together. They include a lot of the material that I've worked with here, and I will be sharing those with you very shortly. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.